All right. All right, so let's get started with the panel discussion. So yeah, today I'm really excited with all these different types of topics, ranging from sensing and tracking and evaluation, as well as real-world deployment of the intervention systems. So this is really exciting topics. So the first, probably like general questions. I'll start with the general questions, and the audience can ask general questions or paper-specific questions. That's okay. So the first question that I have is, most of the work that you guys been doing involve like hardware development, data collection, even field deployment. I'd like to actually ask you guys to share some of the challenging experience that you guys have. Probably start with Bo.
Thank you. I think for evaluating this really fine-grained quality during sports, for example, when we define those variations with the fitness trainers, we didn't expect that people cannot perform these exercises in our experiment, and we will have like faulty or missing data, and then that kind of introduces like lowers the accuracy. Like we didn't expect the participants couldn't push up with the knees off the ground like this. And yeah, and also to really have fine granular annotation when some like not really adhering to the protocol happens is also very costly process.
The data collection part was also really challenging. It takes a lot of time.
Yes, especially when this is something that is visibly similar, but just like in the borderline of this variation or the other variation.
So for us, I would say the hardest part was finding the reference tables to begin with and deciding which scores. There are many, like thousands of medical scores out there, and we had to look for scores that involved intervals since we were looking at interval-based errors. And then also we have to find if the resources are publicly available and all these other things. So it was definitely data collection, and then also then with the apps, we have to make sure that they had the proper GUI that would be able, that way we would be able to extract it correctly. So it's very time consuming on both ends.
Yeah, from my side, so eating and feature of the eating is strongly connected food culture of the local.
Local culture.
Local culture.
Right.
So if someone want to design bring the eating behavior change, we carefully consider the food culture. In my case, we consider the washoku is a Japanese culture. Sometimes washoku is separated ingredient in place the dishes, so we can transform the eating experience. But another culture, sometimes mix the food or something, our approach cannot adapt it.
Yeah, but still, I think that UbiComp system is we're thinking about truly deployable systems, so each specific culture, as long as we're learning something out of that, that should be a valuable contribution, I think. Okay, Luke?
Yeah, for us, the biggest challenge really came from the fact that it was a field deployment. And so that means, of course, sometimes your equipment just stops and needs to be reset, but it's in people's homes and their offices. So I had like a dashboard on my computer for the whole months showing me if anything ever went down. I would then call that participant and get them to reset it, which was super fine for the ones who are like engineers, but the ones who are not technical people, I had to explain them like what the little white button that's the reset button was. So that was, it worked in the end, but it was a lot of like manual attention.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the field deployment, tracking, managing.
Yeah, you think you kind of like put it in the field and it just runs, but it's a lot of manual involvement.
So for me, it's very similar to Bo. It's in the data collection process, because the fact that when we creating instability, we have several ways to do that. One way, especially in the physical therapy domain, one way to do that is to use resistance band. So one thing that we try to do is to use different weights of resistance band, like how heavy it is to the different resistance of the resistance band. And turns out utilize that, it really doesn't change the instability. All of them are unstable in some sense, so that it's very hard to distinguish that. So later on, we have to like collect some data. It didn't work. Then we have to go back to re-evaluate how we're gonna do the data collection and continue to do that. So that's the hardest part for us. Yeah.
So for that one, like you have to constantly talk to the to the
Exactly.
doctors.
Exactly. Yeah. And personally, because this was also a personal experience, I had to do my physical therapy myself. So
Oh,
this
you have
was
to so
yeah.
sorry to hear that.
So this was very personal, and this is very useful in some sense that I would love to use this system on myself, and I could actually benefit for myself, right? Yeah, and on the community. Yep.
It's self-motivated work. So ProxyFit is also self-motivated work. Love exercise.
But like it got difficult. So the thing is like it is also the same with ProxyFit, where like data collection was the most difficult part, because like there is hard limit on how fast you can collect data, because like they need to lean some period to cool down their muscles after like heavy workouts. And another problem was that there was some like shady like pre-processing was going on for the sensor data, even though it clearly stated it is a raw data. Those were the most difficult parts.
Collected data for 14 months. What's going on with that? So
Well,
it's a really long process.
basically like a lot of rejected submissions. So, but yeah.
A lot of rejection leads to more data collection. So all right, lack of data, and
So like every rejection adds like 3 months of experience. So like got 14 months.
I'm sorry to hear that. So any questions from the audience here?
Well, I have one question for the chopstick. Like all the food, that was Japanese food, right? So it was really
Yeah, that was Japanese food.
Yeah.
We
So
focus
it
on
was
that.
really organized, and you said like it's important for like healthy behavior, like the colors of the food that is balanced, and also like how slow you eat. So if everything is separate on different place, it takes more time to you to go rice, vegetables, and you everything do it slow. In my culture, we mix everything and we eat. So, will be like next for the future in your work. Maybe you can analyze which is the best way to eat. Maybe you can instruct the people like separate the food, do not mix together, because we actually mix everything and eat faster. So in this kind of way, maybe we keep it thin and healthy. What do you think about that? No, no, it could be like our food we can separate. Is this? Okay.
Yeah, each Japanese food also the one of the key solution. But if the starter as the vegetables, it can be our glucose level can control the more, how to say, this kind of carb. If you start from some bread or some sugar or something, so the blood level increase highly, so you can control this kind. So the way to eating can affect such kind of healthy direction.
So I think that the question may be related to the like interface metaphor, right? So you use the chopstick movement as a painter, and also the color the food to the color the painting, right? So when the food is mixture, then you can probably come up with like different types of metaphors that can be translated into the painting, probably.
Thank you. And can I?
Yeah, so go ahead. Yeah.
It's for AMU and like the magnetic.
Magnetic.
Yeah, it's just like why you compete against AMU and magnetometer if like inertial measurement units inside they have a magnetometers. Most
So
of them
like,
already.
I think like that is a matter of the terminology. But I believe like it is named after inertial measurement units. So while like most manufacturers claims like there's 9-axis inertial measurement unit, which includes magnetometer, but I think technically that is not a correct way of saying it, and magnetometer should be like separated from IMEs.
So what you mean is like you're competing magnetometer with acceleration data, with the only gyroscope data, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So if you compare the smart desk and the physio or the magnetic based assessment, so those kind of represent two ends of the spectrum. One is that people have to be reminded of doing it. The other is that mostly you do that voluntarily. But even in physio, you have the problem. It's not just about how well you do it, but whether you remember, or maybe you're too lazy to do it. So and if you and also there's an aspect to should you push yourself, right? So should I? Is it safe for me to actually go beyond maybe my limit, or kind of overcome some kind of resistance of doing something? I wonder if I have some comments on that. Like look at not just the quality or like just the assessment itself, but also pushing people to do it, or potentially at least within the safe limits, like getting people to exercise more and better.
That's a really great question.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. So I can speak to it from the standing desk perspective. We take into account context, but I think one context that we haven't looked at yet, but is really important, is like the user's like own personal body state context, like the physiological context, because like there will be days that you're like feeling super fit and you can stand all day, and days that you like probably shouldn't. I've seen there's a app that's like the gentle, it's a gentle physio, like gentle exercise app that changes your step goals day by day depending on your own like capacity on that day. So I think some days that upper level will be totally different, and incorporating that context I think is super important to employing this in the real world in a way that's actually beneficial for users.
You're saying about the state.
Yeah.
Probably like you. I mean like David, you probably have more to say about changing behavior. Right?
Well, regarding that, so this is a very interesting perspective, because for someone who is injured, you have to consistently to improve your muscular, or like whether it's joint or whether it's your muscle, you're changing it like on daily basis. That's why we have a comparison, like a baseline, right? You need to have an anchor that is you come from the clinics, and you use that baseline to help you to as a baseline to know how close are you to that baseline, so that you not overdo yourself or underdo yourself.
Yeah. So what about you, Bo? I mean, the quality, right? Once you track the quality, right? So you want to actually push the users to really have that quality exercise, right? So can you comment on that?
I think down to different individual, I think that's a very important aspect. If you look at the existing machines for exercise, there are disclaimers that you should consult a physician whether you're fit to do these different stuff.
So I mean, some sort of a medical guideline, or like really really who knows a lot about that, following the guideline so that you can do it safely. Jason?
Yeah, so I noticed that the work that was presented in this session seems to have been done in a variety of countries, which I think is excellent. And what I'm wondering is sort of if you, in any of your work, saw ways that you think that the country that you did your work in impacted what you found. Or maybe another way of sort of asking the same question is, if you were going to do an additional study or data collection, what would you change about the setting, maybe the participants, maybe the country, maybe something else, but what would you change to sort of increase our confidence that your findings maybe represent something broader than the context that you did? And
a really interesting question. You want to start first? Yeah. David, yeah.
So this is such a good question. In our case, we're only doing shoulder exercise, and the reason why it's shoulder exercise is actually one of the three toughest, most injury exercise, or most likely you have to do physical therapy in the United States. And the other two will be neck. I believe it's spine, neck, and the glute, like butts. Knee, actually. It's knee, neck, and shoulder. these three exercise. So for my answer to that question would be, first, I need to change what type of exercise we can do. Because currently we're only supporting on three-shoulder exercise, but to be honest, I think other exercises should also applicable in this scenario. Additionally, most people who are injured are, in our case, will choose healthy participant. Well, I don't think that's a good assumption. We need to use actual patients, maybe actually population from age that are higher, because right, those are the people who are more likely to get injured. So, but also right, there's a problem with IRB and everything. So, but again, like I agree that population actually really matters. However, I'm not really sure how the nationality would affect in this perspective. I heard something about more developed country versus developing country. There are more people accepting remote physical therapy compared to the other. Like I think some of my parents, they really don't. If they get injured, they don't want to go to therapy. They said, yeah, it's fine. I would just rest for 2 days, or they just keep working, right? But yeah, walk it off. So like, but they still need it. So I think to people who are older, it's also very important to them to get to know this type of things. And even if they don't like to go to physical therapy, they still have the option to do it at home. So yeah. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, so our study was conducted in Germany, where generally the kind of like working conditions are quite good, and people have like pretty set, reasonable length days. And I think there would be probably other countries with pretty different standards or traditions on like how long the day is, and that could probably lead to different results. Another thing is all or almost all of our participants were in offices with either like 1 to 2 or 3 people, like they had their own kind of private offices in their place, or they were at home. And I would be super curious to now run this in like the big open concept space. If now there's just like everybody's desk going up and down all over the place, there'd be some probably really cool social dynamics happening there, and like social pressures if you're not the one standing. Yeah.
Anybody? Right now, talk about like cross-country apps.
Yeah, so while all the apps that we found were on the US Google Play, there were some apps in different languages. For example, the one example I showed, the Muse app, that was actually a Brazilian app that you can download in the US as well. I will say though, I think the regulatory aspect, it's completely different from each region in the world. So, and these are also only Android apps. We didn't even go into iOS apps, which a lot of people have as well. So there are a lot of things that we can possibly go into a bit more. We focused on US apps though, mainly because we are in the US. It's easier to access with Google Play, but also many of the apps are in English, and a lot of medical literature start in English as well. So then it's easier to translate and see how it's being used in other situations. So I would say it would be interesting to see in other Play stores in different regions of the world if they have apps that do calculate these scores. So that could be an interesting study to see.
So I think that we have some more time. So yeah, so I think that, so from the audience, more questions? It's like we're running out of questions. So one thing that I'd like to actually end with the session is because some of you guys worked on tracking and evaluation. Some people worked on tracking and intervention. So I saw the intervention design. When it comes to real world field trial, it's like really well executed, right? And then the simplification of the system, like it's really difficult to actually build really robust, really many function prototype that can be used in the field. So in that sense, I would say that system itself is really simplified so that we can really deploy the system, so that we can really understand how the users are using. But on the other hand side here, when people are working on evaluation and tracking, they really focus on specific technique, right? So in depth. So I'd like to actually pose a question for those who worked on tracking and evaluation. So what is your next step? So really willing to actually design new intervention, right? And at the same question to for those who did intervention. So at this point, I think that you have rather really simple intervention so that you can really understand what's going on. So I wonder, like, what are some of the advanced sensing where UbiComp? So I'd like to actually on the advanced sensing technique you like to actually add on. So each one by one, and then we'll end the discussion session. Start with the Bo. Yeah.
Yeah, so we were in our lab. We do a lot of sensing with the physical activities, but when we realize when we come into this quality, really fine granularity, it's quite difficult from this real-world experiments. So that's why we now have a new project looking into simulating data through motion captures and manipulate the motion captures with different variations. So we can add diffusion to add those quality of execution variations to manipulate the motion captures, and then simulate the sensor data, and then put that to validate into real-world recording.
So, as I mentioned before, I think the issue lies with regulatory frameworks and also how we can expand our research so that we can include more applications. With our toolchain, we can implement it either on the App Store side or even give it to clinicians to use it themselves. But I think the answer is never to have the user have to provide their own reliability and security. There should be more pressure on app stores and developers to make sure that they are providing the correct and accurate applications for users. So I think we can have the developers possibly use this tool and be like, hey, before you implement this and before you publish it, double check and make sure your app is accurate.
I think one of the remain challenge is how to overcome the habituation and the burden, because kind of the eating tasks so they may not affect if the user burden. So one of the possible solution is integrating the generative AI, so we can automatically generate depend on the user context. And okay, today we'd like to show some Fuji-san's paintings, and yeah, today we select cute animals or something. So how to integrate such generative AI is important. Yeah.
That's your next UbiComp paper.
Yeah.
Next year, right? So, all right.
Yeah, thinking, preparing.
Yeah, so one of our next steps is actually pretty clearly sensor-based, which is getting a bit more context about the user. So in particular, right now, our kind of smart mode really just determined if you were no longer on your computer, which works most of the time, especially for people doing programming jobs and stuff. But then people who draw physically, it would then interrupt them. Or if they had a meeting leaning on their table with a person, it would then change. So yeah, getting the non-computer activity is obviously kind of a sensor-based task. So I think that's one. But the other one is kind of these learnings we have from our study are already only kind of 1 or 2 steps away from really being deployed in the real world. So I think trying to push to actually make the research touch the real world there as soon as possible is a step I'd also like to focus on pretty soon.
So the other comment is that it can actually empower users so that they can have more options.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, already have been working on this project for a long time now. It's this paper was a year ago.
Not
So
because it rejected multiple times.
no. Yeah, actually. Well, so basically, we actually conducted another user study on the app in general, and the one thing that we found is similarity score provides a good base for knowing how close I'm good to the anchor exercise, but it's not good enough. Meaning, okay, I got a 95% accuracy. So what? What does that tell me to the anchor exercise? How can I get to 100, or how can I get to 1 in this case? Which means we're really focusing on how to explain to the user what does this exercise mean compared to the anchor, and how can we tell you to improve your exercise from that, so that we actually have a paper submitted called micromotion. It's actually thinking about at different stage of the exercise, what does that tell you, and how can you improve at the at the raising time or as a lowering time.
Yeah.
Okay, so I do agree with that. Like evaluation is more important part, but unfortunately, current state of magnetic field sensors are not that accurate enough to give you a more like detailed evaluations on your exercise. So what I'm interested in instead of measuring the evaluations of the exercise quality itself is that what I have figured out is that actually like maybe the more important part is like how you cool down your muscles and how you take a rest. So maybe we need to evaluate like how, like you, if you took enough rest, or like if you need some more, then maybe we need to keep them from like exercising again too early. So maybe that would be a interesting part to research.
All right, so let's thanks all the panelists here for their valuable contributions. So with that, we end the session, but I'd like to actually emphasize that we have 4 posters, although, so a poster presenter, can you raise your hand? Yes, right, we have at least 1 poster presenter. So, I mean, we have 4 really wonderful, poster presentation here that are really related to the, the sensing and tracking and evaluation part. We have blood pressure measurement while you're sleeping. We have also systems that talk about the PPG using the wearable. And also we have the information walker. So for the information walker, using physiological signals to detect really tonic information working environment. So I mean, there are multiple posters over there. So do take a look at it and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you so much.